Based on the dramatic impact World War I had on the U.S. home front economically and politically, it can be concluded that it was not a just war to enter. Although the economy was temporarily improved, a multitude of factors eventually led the economy into turmoil. International relations and policies also had later consequences, as the war created political tension between certain nations, which is an indirect cause of World War II decades later. Overall, entering the war did more good than bad, regardless of the major strides that were made in society socially. Joining World War I was a terrible economic decision to make on the United States' part. It led to circular lending, an automobile radio boom, and a widespread use of the credit system, all of which tanked the economy before 1930. After the Central Powers lost World War I, they, mainly the Germans, were forced to pay reparations to the Allied powers, mostly Britain and France. The United States banks didn't forgive the British and French of their wartime debt, so they were paid by the British and French. Even though they were on the other side of the war, U.S. banks still lent to Germany. This created a circle of lending and trading money between the countries, and allowed the U.S. economy to flourish during the Roaring Twenties. The system of circular lending was flawed, however, because the United States banks were lending too much to the Germans, who weren't paying it back fast enough for the banks to make money. This slowly caused the economy to decline during the 1920s, eventually busting it in the Great Depression of 1929. The end of World War I ushered in a whole new era of industry, beginning with the mass production and sales volume of Henry Ford's Model T. It was a revolutionary new invention, a horseless carriage that could run on liquid fuel and was faster than any horse buggy. The radio was also a new invention that expanded the scope of product endorsement and advertising exponentially. This led to an economic boom because of a lot of consumer spending, but many people wanted new technology who couldn't afford to spend the money it cost. This led to widespread use of credit and lending system. People got loans from banks to be able to pay for new technology, but couldn't pay the money back. This put many people in debt, making them lose their money and jobs. After many people got laid off, small businesses closed and consumer spending dropped. Businesses lost money, the stock market tanked, and the Great Depression began. In conclusion, World War I was a bad idea for the U.S. to enter economically. World War I was also unjust to enter politically. Shortly following the war, the League of Nations was founded as a result of the Paris Peace Conference. This organization was made primarily to sustain world peace. However, although Wilson advocated for joining the League, as it is made clear in Document I, he did not gain popular support, and the United States never joined. Document G is Article X of the Treaty of Versailles, which is the primary reason the U.S. did not join. Republicans in the Senate criticized this section of the treaty because by ratifying such a document, the U.S. would be obligated to defend another League member if it was attacked, which could result in the U.S. being pulled into another war. The Lodge Reservation in Document H was made in order to amend Article X and detach America from many of the obligations it would have in the League, but these changes were not ratified and the treaty as a whole never passed Congress. This did not, however, discourage Wilson, as Document J states, but rather it gave him all the more reason to bring this country to a sense of great opportunity and greater responsibility. The U.S. not joining caused the League to lose credibility and made other countries feel threatened and become more cautious. These international tensions led to the militarization of Germany and Japan, which is one factor of the cause of World War II decades later. Politically, this war caused more problems than it solved. Socially, however, the country grew for the most part. The Great Migration had a major effect on African Americans. African Americans migrated to escape the widespread racism of the South, to seek out employment opportunities in urban environments, and to pursue what was widely perceived to be a better life in the North. Also, a boll weevil infestation that had destroyed many crops in the South made it difficult for blacks to provide money, and without income there was no way to feed their families, so hundreds of thousands of African Americans packed up their lives and headed north. The labor unions began to get the recognition that they long awaited, including ones for women as well as children and blacks. As the Great Migration occurred, the number of jobs for women began to decrease. Many white women struggled to get domestic jobs because of the increase in black women. With the fight for suffrage at an end, a band of young women was chosen to go to war with the soldiers as nurses to show the strength that could give them the respect that they wished to gain. The Harlem Renaissance began, and the music, joy, and beauty that came along with it were worth the Great Migration. The Roaring Twenties became known as a period of economic flourishing and freedom socially and sexually. However, during this time there were a multitude of controversial acts passed by Congress, including the ones explained in Document B and Document C. The Espionage Act and Sedition Act drastically limited the speech rights that people had. Many could be detained for disturbing the peace, or for making any speech that could threaten the U.S. They were passed largely due to paranoia. These acts were widely criticized by the public, but parts of them are still enforced in today's society. Overall, for the most part, great advancements were made in the United States socially, with the exception of some drawbacks from the war. In conclusion, considering all of the ramifications of World War I, it can be concluded that it was not a worthy war to enter. Its effects can be somewhat credited to causing the Great Depression and later on, World War II. Economically and politically, it led to the stock market crash of 1929 in a variety of ways, and instigated some of the international political tension between powerful countries. Had the war been avoided, many of the tragic events that took place after it could have never occurred.